Hello and welcome to another Spring into Java. Quick note, I do apologize for the latency in between my videos. I have been having some personal health issues, but we are back today for another video. So today's video we're going to be handling the commands from the last video. We are going to be making some changes to a couple of our classes. We're going to be creating a new interface as well as a bookshelf controller. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in, fill up that cup of coffee and let's dive on in. So, little housekeeping first. We need to jump into our repository here because we need to change this from an optional to collection. Because we're looking to get back because our Discord owner can have multiple shelves. So each user can have multiple shelves which have multiple books. So we're looking to get a collection of the shelves that the Discord owner has rather than just a single shelf. So next, we want to dive over here to our bookshelf service where we're going to make a quick correction to this because this here is now going to be not an optional, so we're not just checking to see if it's present. Instead, we're going to wrap this in a little objects non-null. So if the object in question is not null, then we want to, we are still going to convert it, but we are actually going to get rid of this code, and we are going to return the bookshelf.stream because we want to stream in this array of bookshelves that we have. And we then want to make a filter. And I know this seems a little redundant, but we're going to make a filter for non-null because we want to just make sure that our objects are, again, not null. After we've made, we'll just kind of chop this down so it's a little easier to read. So after we've filtered it, we then need to map it. Now what this here means is we're going to take in this object and we're going to do something with it to map it to a new object. In our case, we're just going to be taking advantage of our command that we've already created, which simply converts the object to a DTO. And lastly, because this is a list, we now need to collect this answer, and we're going to collect it to a list. Now, just so that we have this all right, we will make sure that we are taking all that in correctly, and just so that it makes sense, instead of being a get bookshelf for user, it's going to be get bookshelves. And that makes a little more sense. So right here, we are going to find the collection of, we're returning the collection of bookshelves from the user, If it's not null, we're going to stream it in, filter it out for not for null objects. Then we're going to be mapping it to convert it to a, or sorry, we're going to then map the data access object, or like the raw data object from the database, and we're going to convert it to a data transfer object so that we can use it through the service levels of our web application. And finally, we are collecting these as a list. So now, next, we are also going to need to have another way to get these lists. So we're going to hop over to our Glave Studios network, and we're going to make a GET request. But first, we need a way to save our bookshelves. So we are going to create a public void that is simply going to save shelf, and it's going to take in a bookshelf. And all this is going to do is go into the bookshelf repository and simply save the model. That's it. That's all that does. So now we also, before we hop over to our other class here, or our network class, there is another thing that I would like to do here, which is simply going to be get a bookshelf DTO, or sorry, get a bookshelf for a shelf ID. So let's make a public bookshelf and we're just going to call it get bookshelf for ID, and this is just simply going to take in a long of a shelf ID. And from here, we're just going to simply make a call to the repository. And we are going to find by shelf ID. And we're going to pass in the shelf ID. Now, right quick, we are going to have to create that method. So let's jump on into here, and we'll just make this real easy and have this, we'll have our IDE create this for us. So we're going to get a single instance. This is going to be an optional shelf ID, done. Now we'll come back in here and simply return shelf dot or else null. So now what that's going to do is take in the optional value, and it's going to return that value if it's present, or else it's going to return a null. So one way or the other, this is going to return the model of the bookshelf that we're looking for, or it's going to be a null object, and we can just handle that at the appropriate time. So into the Glave Studios network, right down at the bottom of the class, below the post information, we're going to create some getter information here, or some HTTP GET request. So the first thing we're going to do is make a GET request, and then we're going to make an HTTP response entity so that we can then call upon that. So first thing, let's make a private HTTP GET that takes in a URL. And these are going to have some sort of shortened, silly names because get and get, but it's just what it is. So in here, we're going to be creating an HTTP GET, and we're going to be calling it HTTP GET, which is going to be equal to a new HTTP GET with the URL that we're providing. Now we're also going to be sticking in a couple of headers on here, which are quite literally the same headers that we are adding up here, except we're adding them down here, and we'll just make sure to, and now we're looking to just return the HTTP GET. Done. Now, we need to make a default here. This is going to be a default method from the network, and we'll take advantage of this inside of our bookshelf network once we create that. So, right here, we're going to make a default HTTP response. And this is going to be fetch HTTP GET response. And this is just simply going to take in a string of the URL. Make sure you spell that correctly. All right, so now in here, we are going to make a try with resource. And the resource is going to be a closable HTTP client. And we're just going to simply call this HTTP client, which is then equal to get our HTTP client. Now, in here, we are going to be making a call to the GET and just returning our response. So we're going to just simply return HTTP client .execute, and the request is going to be get HTTP GET, passing in the URL. And yes, we will have to add in a catch clause, and we're going to just collapse the redundancies, and that's that. So next we're going to need to next we are going to need to go and make a bookshelf network. So let's dive into our Discord bot, Java network, and we're going to create a new network interface, and this is going to be the bookshelf network. And this is going to just make sure we have that proper. Rename file, there we go. And this is going to be extending the GlabA Studios network. So now we can use the commands that we had, or the get and post methods inside of here. So we're going to need to make 3 methods. We're going to need to make a way to create a bookshelf, to update a bookshelf, and to get a list of bookshelves. So first and foremost, we're going to make a default, and this one is going to be a string, and it's going to be post create new bookshelf. And this is going to take in a bookshelf DTO. and we'll just simply call that DTO. All right, so now in here, we are going to be making another try with resource, and this is going to be a closable HTTP client. So we're just going to call it HTTP client equal to get HTTP client. All right, so this is going to be an HTTP response. That is going to be submit post with body and await reply. And in here, we are going to be what we're going to be pasting in here is going to be our address that we haven't created yet, but we will create soon in our controller. But right now, we are going to be it's going to be the base URL, and then we're going to concatenate the address that we want to go to, which would be v1 bookshelf, and simply create. And we are then going to be adding on the get string from DTO. We're going to pass in our DTO. And then we're also going to add in our HTTP client. And of course, make sure that is not inside of your concatenation. All right, so we will now add our catch clause. And make sure we return null if nothing else, All right, so now we want to make sure that the response is not null, and if it isn't, simply return the entity string. So if objects dot non-null response, then we want to return entity utilities dot to string, and the thing that we're looking to pass into the string is the response dot get entity, and we need to then tell it that it is going to be UTF-8. And there's that. Now we're going to copy and paste this because we're going to be doing pretty much the same thing to update the bookshelf, except we're going to a different except we are going to be going to a different address. But other than that, here we go. A create and an update. So next, we need a way to get a list of bookshelves. So we're going to make a default. This is going to be a list that's going to return bookshelf DTO. And we're simply going to call this get bookshelves for user. And this is going to take in a long, which is going to be a Discord user ID. And from here, we're going to make another HTTP response, which is going to be fetch the HTTP response and the URL that we're looking to go to. Again, we haven't created this yet, but it's going to be the base endpoint dot concat, and we're going to concatenate again v1 bookshelves or bookshelf. This time we're going to say fetch, and we're going to say shelves. Add in a slash, then we're going to concat another string, which is going to be the Discord user ID to string, and we'll end that off. And of course, because this one's going to be getting a response code, we want to check to see if the response code is not okay. We want to return null, else we are then going to just map it to our list of DTOs. So the way we're going to do that is if the response dot get status line dot get status code does not equal HTTP response of an status of SC OK, then we are going to return null. And now else, we're then going to simply try. And what we're going to try to do is to return a new object mapper, if I can spell right, object mapper, and this is from the this is the object mapper from our faster XML Jackson data bind. And in here, we're going to tell it to read the value, and the value is going to be the response, but it is the string of the response. So this is going to be the entity util. Entity utils dot toString, and this is simply going to be our response dot get entity, and again it is UTF-8, and then we need to tell it that the type that we're looking to respond back with is a new type adapt or type reference, and this is getting a bit long. Now we're going to be returning the type reference. The type reference is a list of bookshelf DTOs, but now as you can see it's kind of faded out. That's because it is redundant and not needed. So our IDE is smart enough to tell us that. So this type reference is a way of, generally if we were looking to just map this to a simple POJO, we would simply just pass in bookshelf.class and it would know to map the to map that entity or that JSON that comes in to a POJO object. However, we're getting a list back, so we need to tell it that there is a type reference, and that type reference is a list object that contains the bookshelf DTOs. But now, because we are returning that type, we don't need to pass that into the diamond brackets because it is redundant, and with Java 17 you don't need to be that specific. If you were coding in something like Java 8 or prior, you would need to include that type reference in there. However, because again, Java 17 is a little bit smarter, we don't need to actually make the redundant reference. And now you see that I collapsed all of these just so that it would throw the runtime error, as opposed to letting it. What I could have done there is I could have left a message saying that there was a JSON mapping exception or an IO exception or something, and been a little more specific in my logging. But for what we're looking to do, it's just fine to let any kind of exception that comes in get thrown out as a runtime exception because it'll get printed in the clause. So now that we have a way to create, update, and get our bookshelves, the next thing that we need to do is create our REST controller inside of our Spring Boot application. So we're going to jump on back over to our Spring Boot. We're going to hop into this library, and we're going to go to our network controllers, and we're going to create a new Java class. And this one is going to be bookshelf controller. All right. So now there is a couple of annotations we have to add into here. Because this is a REST controller, we are going to tell this that it is a REST controller. Because we are going to be implementing our bookshelf service, we want to tell this to require required args constructor from our Lombok. And also because this is a REST controller, we need to tell this where the mapping is. So this is going to be our request mapper, and this is going to be /API /v1/bookshelf and now we need to make our private final bookshelf service and bookshelf service. There we are. Spring will auto wire that in. So now the first thing we need to do, I'm going to trip over my tongue. I apologize. We need to create a way for that post mapping for the update and the create. So let's start out with a post mapping, and this will be for create. And we'll just simply call this one a private response entity, and this one is going to be just a simple string, and we'll call this create new bookshelf. And this one is going to take in a request body. So we add in the @requestbody, and this tells Spring that we want a body with this post request, and the body that we're looking to get is the bookshelf DTO. Now we're just simply going to call that DTO. All right, so now in here, if the objects is null, because if they're passing us in a null object, we simply want to return new response entity, HTTP status, no content, because that means there's no content provided. All right, and because we're returning a string, we can actually be a little more friendly to ourselves, and we'll even tell ourselves that there was no shelf provided. All right, so next we already know that the bookshelf is there. So we're going to make a var for a new shelf. And this is conveniently in our service class. So bookshelf service dot create new bookshelf. And we're going to take in the DTO dot get shelf name, the DTO dot get shelf description, and then the Discord owner ID. So there we go. Next, we're going to need to make a call to the bookshelf service, and this is going to be save shelf that we just created earlier. And we'll tell it that we want the new shelf. And now we can return a new response entity, and we're going to tell it successfully added a new shelf. And we'll respond back with an HTTP response of OK. There we go. Done. And because our update is going to be basically the same thing, I'm just going to save us a little bit of time, and we're going to copy paste that. This one is going to be update. This is going to be update bookshelf, and it's taking in a bookshelf. There was no bookshelf replied, but now we're going to make a call that this is going to be a cached shelf, and this one here, we're looking to make a call to the bookshelf service, and this is going to be get the shelf for an ID, and then we're going to be taking in the bookshelf, or the DTO, sorry, dot shelf ID. So now we're getting the specific shelf in the database, and that's going to be our cached shelf, and we're calling it the cached shelf because it's one that is stored in our database. So next we're going to be making another one, which is going to be the updated shelf. And this one here, we're going to be making a call to our bookshelf service to update the bookshelf. And the bookshelf that's coming in is going to be the cached shelf that we have. And of course, the DTO is the DTO. Done. Now, once we're done with this, we're now going to be making a call to save this and successfully updated shelf. There. Now, next, we're going to be making a get request. So this one here is going to be tied in with the getting the bookshelf. So in here, we're going to go ahead and make this a get mapping, and this one is going to be, what did I call it? Fetch shelves and then the Discord ID. There we go. All right, so that's going to be the parameter for our, for the URL to get to this method. And private response entity. Oh, what am I doing? Next, response entity. This one is going to be returning, and it's going to be returning a list bookshelf DTOs. And this one's going to simply just be get bookshelves for Discord user. And because we have a path variable, we're actually going to path variable, and the path variable is going to be a long, and we want it to be the Discord user ID. So next we're going to run down and make a call to our bookshelf service to get the bookshelves for the specific user. So we'll make another variable and we'll call this shelf equal to the bookshelf service dot get bookshelves for user ID, and we're going to pass in the Discord user ID. Now, next we want to see if that is a null. We're going to return if object brackets like objects dot is null shelves. So if for some reason this is null, we're going to return a new response entity, which is just going to be a status. Whoops. Which is just going to be an HTTP status of no content. Because otherwise, we're going to return throw this on a new line. And the reason I'm throwing these on a new line instead of just beside it is it makes it easier for debugging. When you look to come back later and you're looking to debug and you're looking to throw some breakpoints around, and it's a little easier to do that when this is on a new line versus when you're trying to figure out if it's been if it's a call that's being checked or if it's the actual return statement. So personally, I just like to throw these on new lines. And we're going to respond with HTTP OK. There, done. So our controller is done. We have a way to create, update, and get bookshelves. So next thing we need to do is back over in our bookshelf. If we're looking to create a new bookshelf, then we're simply looking to check, make a check to see if the object is null. Then we're going to send the hook that something is wrong. So if objects is null, and we're looking to check if the hook is null. Because if the hook is null, and again, I need to put that in brackets. If the hook is null, something went wrong, null, and return because we're not going to go any further. But if it is, we're going to make it DTO, which is going to be a new bookshelf DTO. And we're then going to be looking to pull the option name from the object mappings. So we're going to make a var for option, and this is going to be the option mapping dot get, and we're looking for name. And of course, if the object is not null, so long as the option is not null, we are going to set the DTO dot set shelf name to be that of the option dot get as string. All right, and now option number 2 is we're just going to be basically doing the same thing for the description. So we're just going to copy and paste that. This is going to be DE description. Set shelf description. Whoops. Try to hold in too many keys at once. So we're just going to call this option 2 just to keep it simple. And again, so if the option is there, then we're going to set the description to be that of that option. Next, we're going to make I do apologize. Next, we're going to need to get the Discord user ID. So this one's going to be a var, because it will be a long Discord user ID, and this is going to be taken from the hook interaction, but we need to first make sure that it's not null. So objects.require non-null. So this is going to require us to have a non-null object, and that is going to be the hook.get interaction dot get member. So that's going to get the member, and then from there we're just simply going to get the ID as a long. And we will set that as our Discord ID. Now, from here, we will jump back up here, implement this slash, and it's going to be implementing bookshelf network, because here is where we're simply going to be post create new bookshelf, and we're going to be passing in the DTO. And because of the fact that we are passing this in as a string, so this essentially is a string, and we're just going to call it the reply. We want to then send that reply as a response to the user. So in here, we're then going to take the hook, and we are going to send a message. The message is going to be the reply, and we're just going to queue that. Done. That's all there is to creating a new bookshelf, because we're creating the object, giving it a name, a description, grabbing the Discord user ID, and we're setting the user ID. From there, we're just posting that to our backend network, which will take that as a create, and it will create the new bookshelf object, give it an ID. When it's creating it, it's going to create the new actual model, which will give it an ID at the time, set the name, the description, and the owner, as well as we're going to get the current time and date for when this was created and updated. And that all goes right into our database. Very simple. And next, we will be doing basically the same idea for these next couple of methods here. This is getting quite lengthy in time. So in our next video, we will go ahead and we will handle the name change, the redescribe, the add book, and remove book options, because we are going to be making a select model so that we can present our users the option to select the bookshelf that they want to edit, and then we will be handling the reply from that select model and presenting them the applicable options. So if that is something that you're interested in, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you can be notified when that video is released. If you learned something today, then give me a like. Let me know that this was useful to you. If you happen to want to join the Discord community and get involved with the conversation, or even play around with the bot yourself when it's online, the link to my community Discord is down in the description below. So feel free to hop on into the community and chat up with me. Give me an idea of what you want to see in the future videos. Give me an idea of what you'd like to see as future projects. I am also doing a series called The Midnight Coder, where I'm just going to be basically streaming gaming or game designing, and we're going to recreate a Discord game bot, and honestly we're just going to kind of do different applications and different things. So if you happen to have a project in mind that you'd like to see written out and like to kind of learn how it's done, drop me a message, send me a comment, get into my community and get your voice heard. I really enjoy making these videos. I enjoy coding and I really enjoy teaching. So if you enjoyed my teaching style, let me know. And we'll see you in the next video.